This episode is brought to you by
Co-creation.
Welcome to Leadership Actually. It's not love, it's leadership.
That's it.
Welcome, Lisa Powney.
Welcome, Lee Rogers. How the devil are you?
I am Pucker.
Pucker pie.
I am. Like, what's not to love about today? It's an absolute joy.
Nice.
How are you?
I'd say pucker, but that's not my word. But I'm good. I'm magic. I'll say I'm magic. I'm good. I've had a really exciting day, and life's good, and the boy's good. My Freddie's all good. So he went to a school disco last night.
Oh.
And he said to me, he said, "Hey, Mum," he says, "Mummy," he still calls me Mummy. He says, "I want to look like a man." He said, "I want to look really cool. I don't want to wear my normal joggers. I want to, I said, "All right, okay." So luckily I'd found this velvet jacket that we've got. And he was like, "Yeah, that's super cool. I want that and some jeans," he says. "I want to look like a man." And then he said to me as we got in the car, he said, this is his saying, he said, "Listen, Mum," he says, "cool boys don't look back at the explosions." That's me. I feel proper cool. And part of me was like, oh, he's really growing up. But I was pleased I was able to help him look like a cool guy. Or whatever, that might be a metaphor in life, but that is his little thing. So,
Oh, that's really cute. Really cute.
They grow up too soon though, do they?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We often talk about the parenting side of it, but it's...
Well, it's first leadership, isn't it?
Yeah. Often get it wrong,
Yeah.
often messy.
Always fall over on that.
So let me ask you a messy question before we get to today's distinguished guest.
Yeah.
When have you reached for something that you've really strived for and maybe not got the whole way there and fell over a little bit and it's been messy?
Oh my God, that's like my life. It's like my life, really. I talk about that a lot. But I guess the one that comes to mind, the big one, was after my mum left or passed away, and I wanted to do some good, and I wanted to speak about our story as a family. And so I decided, even though as part of my job I facilitate a lot and I have talked on stage, but probably more about leadership stuff, I wanted to tell my own story. And that felt very different, kind of a vulnerability that I'd never really felt before. So I went on this journey to put like a keynote together. And then as part of that, they said, "I think it'd be really good if you wrote a book." And I was like, I'm a full-time single mum. And I've got, loads of, my job's really busy and all that. No way. I think I might have said a swear word even. And one of the ladies who was a mentor, Jane, she said to me, she was ex-army, an ex-England rugby captain. So she said, "What you need to do is get up at 5 a.m. every morning. We've all got time if you really want it." And I was like, "No, I'm not going to do it." And she said, "Well, why don't you just set your alarm and see what happens?" And I actually set my alarm at 5 a.m. And I had a cup of tea. And then I thought, I'll have a little think. And then I got my journal out and I started. So I did end up writing the book. But that wasn't, and I actually loved that part. So you can do it when you wanted to. But that wasn't the bit that stumbled. It was this story. So I wrote this keynote and I had, help and coaching, and they were brilliant. And they were like, "Yeah, you've got a great story." And actually there was an impact at the end. And they let me go on stage to practice bits of it. And every time I absolutely forgot my words and I couldn't do it. So the first time I started, I had a complete mind blank. There was a room full of people and they had to coach me on stage and I was mortified. I actually read about it. I put it on LinkedIn. And then I did it again and the same thing happened again. And it was a total mind block. I just couldn't say my personal story.
Was it stage fright?
It was vulnerability. It was fear of saying, I think it was more fear of saying things I'd never said before and being judged and not feeling like I could get it right. But I finally got over myself. And when it came to, there was an ultimate day where I did get to speak it and I did it. And it took a lot of work. I did a lot of mind searching and I did a lot of breath work. and lots of different stuff, and I got it over the line, and now I'm really pleased that I did it. It was like a massive goal. I'd written the book and I did my speech, and but there was many moments where I thought, this is never going to happen, I can't do it. So and now I help other people do that as well, get it over the line. So yeah, it's a big question for me. Thanks, Lee.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Do you want to introduce our esteemed guest?
Oh my God,
Ed Clancy, OBE.
Ed. We've been really excited.
Well, thank you very much, team. Thanks.
to see you today. So thank you so much for coming in and listening to us ramble on about our start as well.
Thanks for having me. That's really kind. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to give you your official introduction, and then we'll maybe ask a couple of those messy questions and then dive into your amazing career. We feel so privileged to have you today. Even when I read this out, I'm going to read it as well because I think it's really important. So Ed, you are triple Olympic gold medalist. You have an OBE. You're the world champion team. You're a team pursuit specialist, and you're one of the most decorated cyclists that are out there. But what strikes is that you are more than the medals that you've won. And since stepping off the tracks, you've turned your sights to performance psychology. We'll dive into that. Leadership, working with businesses and teams to transfer the mindset and methods that fueled your elite sports success into now everyday performance. And behind the podium snapshots, there's a story of teamwork, pressure, burnout, and personal reinvention. And we can't wait to explore more.
Thank you very much. That was a very kind introduction. I'm just glad you didn't mention all my failures on that list. So,
Well, on that note then, Ed.
Let's go. Where do we begin? Yeah.
Put him up now. Go on.
Yeah.
We like to start with the messy moments. So if we did say there was a profound messy moment or that didn't go to plan, is there anything that comes to mind that's kind of still with you today in terms of a good lesson learned?
Yeah, I mean, let's just start with the premise that, people think sport's about winning. And, through my eyes, it was the complete opposite. Sport. I like sport. I like seeing kids play sport because I think it gives them this knowledge and understanding that, it's a cliche, right? Success is about failure and learning from it. And what is sport like? Through my own eyes, it wasn't 3 gold medals and Olympic podiums. They were the 30-second moments. It was about suffering and struggling and not making the team, illness, injury, just constantly putting yourself out there for to be rejected. And and I think unwittingly you sort of slowly but surely learn that if you keep coming back for more, failure just serves you the information you need to get things right. Nice. And you asked for a specific example of that. The best example of where I've messed up, messy, got it wrong, I think I had a good start to my career in sort of quite broad terms,
Yeah.
Very fortunate to be part of an incredibly successful talent scouting system through British Cycling, picked up as a teenager. Thankfully, I was able to give up on my non-existent academic ambitions. And we had a massively successful Beijing and London. Real big highlight. The eyes of the world were watching. For me, that was my second Olympic gold medal on a bounce, plus a bronze.
Yeah.
And sort of ashamed to say that I got to this point where I kind of thought I could do it on my own. There was a lot of change in British cycling following 2012. A lot of people left the building. Sir Dave Brailsford, Mr. Marginal Gains.
Yes.
Even Professor Steve Peters, who was our psychiatrist throughout those glory years, sort of left. And I felt frustrated with life, frustrated with myself. Success never landed with me the way I thought it might. And I became an island.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the thing I really messed up. In business terms, there's sort of 3 stages of dependence, right? You can be dependent on your coach and being spoon-fed information. And I moved into that second state where I was just independent, and I tried working like an island, and it was a total mess. My career really started falling apart in those years. And again, failure taught me that you've got to be part of a team.
Yeah.
You've got to work interdependently, I think is the term, isn't it? Where you're smart enough and let go of your ego and say, well, I still need support from the physios, the aerodynamicists, the coaches, the nutritionists, the psychiatrists, and I think there was a little turning point after that.
Yeah. Good. But we all have these lessons, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, and many people and leaders will have reached out and gone, you know what, I think I can do this on my own. I think, you know, I've got it now. I've learnt all this stuff, and then you realise that life is just a continuous learning process, and it's what you do with it. So what turned for you? What did you go, I need to step back into that space?
I think, again, it's the failure. It was sort of slowly but surely, like watching the numbers. I mean, sports are very... you can't hide in sport, and we sort of mentioned off air that like you can measure everything.
Yeah.
And like, you know, success and failure is very public, you know, whether you want it to be or not. And you just read out all my accolades there, and I'm the most successful team pursuit rider to ever walk the planet.
Yeah.
I'm also the guy that's responsible for leading a Great Britain cycling team to our worst ever team pursuit result at a World Championships over the last 25 years. And I learnt the hard way that success in any walk of life is about effective collaboration with multiple stakeholders. It's about letting go of your ego, saying you can't do this on your own. And you know, you might be a sole trader with a little limited company. You still rely on other people to build a website, to ship your things, to advocate for whatever business it is. You know, it's just all about putting pieces of the puzzle in place, if that makes sense.
Thank you for sharing there. You know, and can be you have all those accolades and those brilliance, and that's really important because that inspires so many. But it's also good to know that we're human too. And thank you for sharing some of that. And beyond, I guess what you've achieved. If someone was asking, who are you, Ed Clancy? You know, as a person. And also, what got you into the passion of cycling? What might you say?
Yeah, in terms of, if I had to describe who I was beyond cycling or accolades on a CV, probably best describe myself as a dreamer that's always had, you know, more ambition and dreams and talent or intelligence. I'm quite an emotive person. I often make decisions based not on intelligence or pragmatic thinking, just what I feel in my heart to be true. I'm probably quite insecure. Despite all that, you know, I'm the sort of guy that wakes up in the night and thinks about everything I've done wrong. I question whether everything I did was right. I'm quite an introvert. I spend a lot of time on my own. I'm a thinker.
Yeah.
And that's probably who I am off the bike. And I can't remember the other half of that question, but that's the flavour of who I am. So
as a young boy,
yeah.
How did that help you get into cycling? What was it that said, I'm going to do some cycling?
The same thing that cycling is, just for context for the listeners, I'm 41 now in March, and I retired a few years ago. I'd give up all of those fancy accolades, all the money accumulated for the simple pleasure of just going out and putting one foot in front of the other, having a deep breath on Sunday morning. And to answer your question, I got into it for those same reasons: fun, freedom, exploration. You know, for me, you know, life's hard sometimes, and riding a bike is almost like sort of physical meditation. You breathe, you put one foot in front of the other, and there's enough going on to sort of distract you from your own thoughts, and you have to be present when you're riding a bike. And you know, on tomorrow morning when I've completed my run of 15 days of working in a row, that's why I love cycling.
Yeah.
That's a deep thing that was formed, you know, in my formative years as a kid, and I still have that now.
You can feel that.
I love it. Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I'm listening there, Ed, and I'm kind of going, I recognise actually golf is like that for me.
Yeah.
Because it's that I have to switch off mentally. I have to focus.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly good, but it's almost my happy place.
Yeah.
I'm just doing the cycling bit, and I'm all right indoors on the indoor bike because there's no like anything around me. I can just crack on. I can watch the sport, whatever. Yeah. When I get back on the road, though, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like hyper alert.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite in that chill out zone yet, but that's the aim, to get to that point.
Yeah, good. I mean, I know I'm biased, but I just think cycling, I sort of see it in like 3 categories. Sport, I think it's the best sport in the world for the obvious reasons. I don't think there's any like sport out there where there's such a beautiful marriage of human and mechanical performance sort of working in synergy. I think if you look at the bike as a transport tool, which I do from a sort of current work as Active Lives Commissioner, I mean, it's an amazing tool. Like, nothing can touch the efficiency of even a 50 quid recycled bike, which I find fascinating, in terms of like kilojoules expended and distance travelled. And, as a leisure tool, that's where cycling really comes good for me. Lee, we could get in a gym and like lift weights up and down, but it wouldn't feel like riding a bike outdoors in green and blue spaces. And there's a weird amount of science that backs that up.
Yeah,
like
100%.
Yeah,
and you do feel it, and I know when I've trained on the bike for 2 hours, because I'm training to do Land's End to John O'Groats in June. Yeah. And I'm breaking it because I don't know if I can do it, but I'm gonna. It's for charity, so I'm gonna. I'm all in now.
Yeah.
But then I
Get
go
some
out
tips.
on. Absolutely, we'll ask for that.
Yeah.
But I get out on the road and it's a completely different experience, feeling, emotion.
Yeah.
You're at one. You feel like one with the world, I guess.
You do.
In that motion.
I'm sort of weirdly into this stuff, Lee, and there's research that if you've had an operation and you're in a hospital room recovering, if you have a window and you can see green stuff outside, you recover faster than if you can't. And I'm not going to do this story justice, but as after the First or Second World War, there were so many injured soldiers that some of them, the recovery places were overflowing, so they had to put some outside, on beds outside. Guess what? The ones outside in the great outdoors, they recovered faster, and it was quite a significant margin. And you're right. You can ride a bike indoors and you get that post-workout dopamine high, but it's not the same on a chemical level as if you do it outside. There's
and it's
more to it,
it's linked to your mood, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's your being out in nature is proven, as you say, but it's linked to your mood, which then ultimately impacts your emotions. Yeah.
There's that inextricable link between physical and mental health, and it's bizarre. Like, I don't want to get too nerdy onto it, but I've always been able to do better power numbers on a bike outside than I have sat on a turbo trainer, and physically there's nothing disconnecting my head and my legs.
Wow.
But there's obviously something in there that sort of says, we're outdoor, life's good, like we can do this, and you can go further and farther and harder outdoors than you can indoors, which is...
Well, one thing I do know is when we interviewed John Dutton on the podcast, and we went to the velodrome, and I looked up and I was like,
oh my gosh.
Like, and I'd seen some of your videos and I'd watched you live in the Olympics, and I was like, how on earth do you it really took me back how steep that was. I was like, oh my gosh.
It's the thing I'd for your listeners that I'd like to say about the velodrome is it's remarkably accessible. I was there only 48 hours ago, and it's sort of in an office job capacity in British cycling, but because I'm like the ex-cyclist, guess who has to put on the skin suit when some corporate types coming to have a look around the track. So I rode the track with there was 4 potential investors of British cycling, and they were all semi-keen cyclists, one complete beginner, and after an hour they're all riding around on the boards, despite how scary it looks. And for anyone listening that's interested in doing a corporate day out there, it's literally like, I don't know, 20 or 30 quid per head. You can get on a higher bike. You can hire the shoes, a helmet. You've just got to turn
team on it.
Honestly, I love it. I mean, there's nothing like sport collective struggle to bond a team. It's remarkably accessible. You can ride the same in London. You can ride the Olympic velodrome in London you can take the whole team there for a few £100, and for what it's worth, it's probably a good day out.
Yeah. Do you have to wear the lycra?
Well, hey, outside of the velodrome, I'm a massive advocate of you don't need lycra. Cycling is for everyone and anyone, and I absolutely love that e-bikes have made cycling so much more inclusive and accessible to people that don't consider themselves cyclists. But again, if you're going to be on a velodrome, aerodynamic drag is such a huge thing. You don't have to be head to toe in fancy lycra, but I don't know if you've got any sort of relatively tight-fitting clothes, that makes a huge difference into how easy it'll feel. So
Yeah.
Can I just go back to one point when I know you've gone into joy mode there, and you can tell it's just exudes from
Love it. I love it.
You talked about the struggle of like elite performance in cycling, and that's not covered a lot. You know, people talk about the medals and the highlight reels. Can you just tell us a little bit more about like the 4-year cycle, some of the struggles? What's it take to get yourself at that elite performance pinnacle, if you like? Whereas what we hear a lot of, we don't see the journey, we see the destination often.
Focus is an interesting word to me, and it's kind of thrown around, I think, in all sorts of circles. To me, a focus means saying no. And if I can try and paint that, a picture of that in words, what does that mean for an Olympic cyclist? You asked me who I was, like, if I had to describe myself and I wasn't a cyclist, I was a dreamer that's always had, like, more ambition than sort of talent. I was never that good as a bike rider. I'd lined up with Bradley Wiggins, Geraint Thomas, the best of the lot, and I don't think anyone has won 3 Olympic gold medals with less talent than me, so I had to focus. So what does that mean? That means saying no to Christmases, funerals, birthdays, even like friends, family. Probably went for 20 years, didn't go on a mate stag do. Focus is about saying no, so I could say yes to rest, recovery, eating right, sleeping right. I'd spend Christmas Day on my own. The real cost of anything in life is how much life you have to exchange for it. Yeah, for me, I don't know if that's giving you a bit of an insight, but it meant saying no to a lot of stuff. And to be honest, there's a lot said for athlete transition, and I don't know if you were planning on getting into this bit later, but it's you have this. I had this sort of romantic idea that, like, when you sort of finish cycling, you'd be more rounded, you'd be able to say yes to other things, and I guess what I'm getting at is you have this romantic idea that you'll reconnect with your long lost friends and your family and your old schoolmates, and but they've all gone. You know what I mean? It's a strange father. I had this weird idea. Maybe I'd meet my one half of my grandparents that helped me when I was sort of growing up as a child. They've gone. That's what the focus costs you. That's the cost. Focus. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
Massive
100%.
sacrifice.
And it's not taken. It's not talked about a lot.
No.
I guess. Is there any? I guess the ultimate question for any athlete is it worth the cost? If you were giving your time again, would you pay that ultimate cost? Because it's massive, right?
That
Huge.
is the real question, Lee. Yeah, like, is it worth it? Honestly, I don't know. There's I don't have kids. If I did, would I recommend that they chose that walk of life to sort of sacrifice everything and anything to sort of to have what you thought would make you happy? Nah, I honestly don't think I would. I think real intelligence is building the life you want. And I guess I grew up like a lot of youngsters do. There's perhaps some young people listening to this, and for what it's worth, I think Instagram and social media is an interesting thing, and it kind of portrays this like image of success. And I sort of, what's it called? Like, I don't know, the American dream. You have maybe a big house, a fast car, maybe a genetically impossible wife, and that's the idea of success. And for me, I kind of grew up with that. Pretty humble beginnings. Just I suppose I always grew up with that. Even subconsciously, that's success. If I win an Olympic, maybe 2 Olympic gold medals, I'll feel like a success. If I can have possession of this place that I live in or that thing that I drive, that I'll feel like I've got enough. And you're a little bit like it's like the Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy goes down the yellow brick road to meet this wizard who will bestow upon her the knowledge she feels, or she'll need to feel fulfilled and complete. And she gets to this wizard, and he's a fraud, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I can. I don't want to be too down about it, but the beauty was in the struggle. It was in the journey. Like Dorothy found everything she needed on that road. Strength, courage, the scarecrow, and that came to life. And it was like, actually, yeah, I had it all along. And that's a little bit what I've realised. It was never the end point. It was never the gold medal. It was never the possession. The best thing cycling did for me was give me like a struggle with purpose that I believed in, at least for that period of my life. Sorry, that was a long-winded, convoluted way of saying I'm not sure if I'd recommend it. I think the only thing I'd say with absolute certainty is just try and be a bit kinder to yourself and to other people.
Yeah.
That's the one takeaway I've got after 41 years. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think it is a beautiful way of explaining it. And, when you started with, who am I? I'm a dreamer. It's always in you, and although there has been huge sacrifice, and I loved where you come to at the end, you have proved that if you have a dream and you come from really humble beginnings, that you can do it, that you don't have to have the best talent, the best behind you, that if you really dedicate that, and the amount of lessons that you will have learnt along the way. And I know you say 41, but there's a whole age to take that into, and to inspire others to move that forward. And I loved that final bit, actually, when I said about my story. Jane, who was my mentor, she came to the same conclusion and said there is joy in the process.
Yes.
You have to set those big, scary, audacious goals, and it takes huge discipline, from the military and in sport she was the same, but actually take the joy of the process is a really important part. So I'm going to dive into that. Good. What is the process of achieving a gold medal? Like what sort of things you have to do to achieve that success as well as the sacrifice? What's the process?
I think, and you can apply this to any walk of life, and I'm quite a simple person, and I'm really nothing special from an intellect point of view at all. I think if you ask yourself two very simple questions. Question number one, like, what's a clear, sharp definition of success?
Nice.
And again, sport gives you that, like, whether you want it or not. In sport, you can say it right on the 4th of July, 2024, we're going to be in LA, and we need to do, we're going to have an Olympic medal. And that brings you on to question number two. So, question number one, what's a clear, sharp, time-bound, ambitious definition of success? Question number two, in order for that to happen, what must be true? Those are the only two questions you need to ask yourself in life. And if you're an Olympian, sport's not easy, but it's simple from that point of view. And unwittingly I kind of learnt that, and I tried to take that into other projects of mine. I'm like, well, it's all so easy to just get stuck on the dance floor, isn't it? Like, you've got to get yourself on the balcony now and again and have a bit of a long-term look and say, but where are we going? Like, what's our definition of success? What's our big wig, the wildly important goal? And only once you do that can you start attributing value to the component pieces that go into it to say, well, if that's going to happen, what must be true?
Yes.
And I'm not saying you can achieve it if you ask those questions. I'm just saying that's the only chance you've got. And it's very, very difficult in the real world that I'm in now. For example, Mayor Oliver Coppard brings me in as his active lives commissioner, and he says, I want to be the healthiest region. So I come at it with my daft questions. I'm like, when? What is health? Is that life expectancy? Is that healthy life expectancy? Is that a perception of health? Is that, how do we define health? And of course that's very, very difficult to answer, and everyone's got a different answer for you. Second question, what must be true in order to do that? And that's really difficult because, in cycling it's dead easy to measure your power, you can measure your drag, you can measure how much protein powder you put in your cornflakes. How can you measure what's the single most impactful thing you can do to achieve the healthiest region?
Yeah.
It's very difficult, but I think even just by asking yourself those questions, it brings a lot of clarity. both like the long-term vision, the medium-term vision, and short-term vision. And yeah, I mean, that's how I always broke down whatever it was Olympics in my head, or even my sort of current project.
I love that difference as well. Yeah, that's like a real, your specific challenge and goal, and then trying to apply that to the world of culture. So you're trying to make a culture change, and everything. Everybody's got a different view of what that looks like and what are the levers that you have to pull. But what is brilliant, and many leaders don't ask all those questions, so that automatically your curious mind goes to that point, which even if we can go, I don't know, at least we've started to ask those questions. Often we don't even get in that space as leaders. We kind of go, oh yeah, we'll accept that is the big goal, and we put lots of stuff in place, and we don't know what's shifting and moving. So at least we've got a starting point to go, we don't know, well, let's go and work that out. Can we work that out?
Marginal gains was probably one of your questions, but I mean, I watched closely when Sir Dave, there's a guy called Dave, who later went on to become Sir David Brailsford, and he was our performance director.
Yeah.
And I watched him, from a distance when I was a kid, sort of getting into the sport through Beijing and London. And, people always talk about marginal gains and like, I mean, I can tell you what marginal gains was in like a mechanical sense, and we do that, in simple terms. Like Dave was very, very good at defining success. I literally sat next to him like some press conference once, probably like 22 years old, going into Beijing, and someone asked Dave, what do you want to achieve in Beijing? And he said, I want to win everything on the track. All right? So we had a clear definition of success there. And then the marginal gains, like question number 2, well, in order for that to happen, what must be true? So we go into a wind tunnel and we'd break things down, and we'd ask stupid questions, like not just what's the fastest frame, what's the fastest wheel. We'd look at the ball bearings, how much pressure's in the tyre, are we filling it with oxygen, nitrogen, helium? You know what I mean? It was an inquisitiveness, a willingness to learn. Like that's what marginal gains was about. And I think asking questions was I don't know, the foundation in which that whole coming to life of the Great Britain cycling team was born. It was asking questions, picking at things.
I don't think we ask enough questions. I don't think in life, we're curious enough as leaders or in that space. So it's a great technique to have. And did that change, like from your first win as a team, your gold medals, to your third? Did the process change, or because you'd won some stuff and did some stuff, or did you apply the same things? Yes, we did. Yeah, we did. I tell you what I learned, I'm not sure if this answers your questions, over like the third and fourth Olympic cycle, I learned that being innovative, being the first to do anything was difficult. Being innovative, being a performance pioneer, it was a journey fraught with trial and error. It was expensive. It was messy. Going second was quick and cheap and easy. For example, I was part of the research and innovation team as soon as I retired, and I was part of a team much better than I was that developed this Hope Lotus bike. It had big wide forks on the front, big wide seat stays, and I won't bore you with why it worked, but the team was very innovative, and developing a bike like that, man, that was expensive, right? Yeah.
It's a lot of XF1 engineers in a wind tunnel, a lot of rider time, wind tunnel time, and it was a painful process making that bike. And we dropped it out in the 2020 Olympics, and by the time we got to 2023, guess what? Everyone had just bought the bike for a few quid, stuck it in a carbon fibre mould and just copied it, right? So, and I think what I'm saying is like the third and fourth Olympics was very, very hard because people saw what we did in Beijing and London, I mean, the first two Olympics. And for the rest of the world, it was very quick, cheap and easy to say, right, they've done this. These are the marginal gains they've implemented. These are the new training strategies and techniques. And they copied it and they caught up very, very quickly. And I mean, your question wasn't about regrets or I wish I'd done differently, but I wish British cycling became very big very quickly. And
Yeah.
what was a very nimble, like a London taxi, you know, if we wanted to make a different decision, either with training or sponsors agreements, technical things, it was like a London cab. It'd just do a U-turn and do something else in Beijing and London. And it had like the autonomy to do that. And then in Rio and Tokyo in particular, I feel like it was a big oil tanker, you know, a huge, great barge. And, you know, trying to make a different decision was difficult and slow and messy and complicated with governance. And I gave up on, I lost my, I gave up believing that I had an ability to make a difference.
Yeah.
You know, on things that I really believed in, like whether it was like where we trained, how we trained through coronavirus. I felt like a lot of, and I think ultimately that's why we didn't do as well as we should have done in my last Olympics, and I feel like I let the team down with that one.
Do you know, that totally resonates with the leadership career that we see. You know, it's an amazing kind of light bulb moment, really, is we often see, you know, the younger leaders come through and they want to be successful, and that journey to success is not easy, and they've got to dedicate a lot, and there's lots of sacrifices, but it's kind of can be a thrilling ride. And then we get through, once they are really successful, you know, and they are, you know, elite leaders or in that space, the harder job is keeping there, and like, how do I keep what I've got? And, you know, I've achieved all this stuff and people are looking at me differently now, and I'm totally in the spotlight. And often we get leaders who are at that part of their career where they're burnt out, and they're really trying to push it, and the role that they thought they had taken on has kind of expanded into something, you know, that they can't like take control of anymore. So, you know, and they've always got to be ahead of the competition. They'd say it's a lot easier to be a follower leader looking up to, you know, trying to achieve what the next person, rather than be that. And it gets lonelier, doesn't it? I guess that's just it. It gets lonelier the higher and more achievement leaders make, and the less people you've got to talk to, rely on, ask, you know, what can we do, because everybody's looking to you to do some of that stuff. So there's a real resonance there with that leadership journey.
So there's two things there I'll pick up on, if that's all right with you. But you mentioned that word control, and that's an interesting one for me. And I was at a team launch on Saturday of a load of junior riders. One of my roles in life is I'm a brand ambassador for a cycle accident management firm that protects cyclists legally, and they sponsor the domestic leading junior road race team. Nice. So all the best junior boys and girls are from will go on to be professional cyclists, like really high performing, driven young boys and girls. And you know, they asked me like, you know, what should I do? Like, you know, give me some advice for being a professional cyclist. And I was like, don't ever think that you don't have loads of control and autonomy over like your own future. Because I've realised, as I've been sort of promoted into, you know, relatively senior jobs in retirement after cycling, even in really quite lofty positions, you don't have a lot of control. No. Right, so I mean, like, let's talk about, if you're a cyclist, you can be a 22-year-old professional cyclist. They've got to see themselves like a little limited company, you know, and they're the managing director, the chief exec, the board and the shareholders. You know, they've got a huge amount of autonomy. Again, are those two questions. What's my definition of success? What must be true in order to get that? You know, and they might not think it, but they've got enough resource to buy a bit of physio time. They could speak to a psychiatrist. They could read a book about how to work well in a team. They can read Professor Steve Peters' Chimp Paradox, How to Perform Under Pressure. You know, they've got an awful lot of autonomy of their own decision making and their own careers. And you know, for example, you might be the Active Lives Commissioner of South Yorkshire. Now, you know, that lines into Mayor Oliver. There's a lot of power being devolved to the mayors, right? Yeah. And Mayor Oliver is a politician, right? He's a decision maker. But, you know, Oliver works in a combined authority, and there's all the local authorities. There's Doncaster, Rotherham, Barnsley, Sheffield, and Oliver that make the decisions. Do the politicians make the decisions? Yes, they do, but they also make the decisions on behalf of the people. Yeah. The same can be said for British cycling. You know, if I was the managing director of the charitable foundation, I line into John Dutton, the chief exec. and he lines into the board, and the board are responsible for the people, and so it's decision making and having autonomy is interesting, and I'm learning how you can. It's about influence, isn't it? It's about having a vision and bringing people along with you, and it's again, professional sport wasn't easy, but it was simple.
Yeah, it's harder.
And I think this is one of the most prominent things that I've come across in my career, Ed, is there's brilliant specialists that then go on to do leadership roles, but have not always had the leadership development or support to take on a leadership role, do a lot of learning on the job, and figure it out as they go.
Accidental.
Kind of accidental leader or accidental manager. I don't know whether that resonates with.
I mean, I feel like I'm quite a curious fella. Like I'm always asking questions, and I'm always watching and learning and looking, and there's a guy called Chris Brindley that I believe you've met yourself.
Absolutely.
I sat down with him 3 years ago because John Dutton introduced me to him and said it might be worth spending a couple of hours of your time with Chris. And
great man.
I was sort of retired from cycling for reasons unbeknown to me. I was, again, I put in fairly lofty positions off the bat, totally undeserving of them. And I said to Chris, what makes a good leader, Chris? And he said, what do you think makes a good leader? And I was like, well, I like leaders that have quite an inspiring vision. I like leaders that can look down the road, don't lose sight of that. I like leaders that have got the back of the team, that praise the team, and ultimately if thing goes wrong, they take the blame. I just watched and learned, and I mean, leadership's in simple terms, it's not about barking orders and giving it the big one. It's about sacrificing yourself for the greater good of the team. That's what true leadership is, right? Simon Sinek's a performance consultant that speaks way more articulately about the issue than I can, but leaders eat last, they should. It's a great example when there's the big .com bubble burst, right? Back in 2008. Nobody really took offence to the fact that all these big leaders and big execs got paid a fortune, and a lot of people didn't. What really upset people was when it all hit the fan, and the big execs and leaders could have saved everyone, but they chose not to. They chose to save themselves, and that's what really upset people. And that's what leadership's about. It's about putting your team first, instilling confidence and faith in your workforce, and
And did you have a leader? I mean, you've described it way better than I could, and very eloquent. So you've put yourself down. You've summarised it amazingly. Is there someone that stood out during your trials and tribulations throughout your career that that really gave you that support you needed at a given moment in time?
I was really fortunate to have, a couple of really high-profile leaders, in my sporting career with Sir Dave Brailsford, a very prominent leader. Steve Peters, Professor Steve Peters, a lot of your listeners will know him from writing The Chimp Paradox, a massive business bestseller book, and I worked with that guy for 13 years, and they were great leaders. But I mean, anyone's got the ability to be a leader, in my opinion, and you don't have to be the person at the top. How do you know who's a good ally, who's a good leader? I mean, it's a cliche, but you don't find out who your best teammates are on the victory parade. You find out who your best teammates are in the wars, in the trenches, when things have gone wrong. And there's a couple of my teammates that you never see them at an after party. They're keep themselves to themselves, they're not high profile. Same can be said for a few coaches I've had. Perhaps Matt Parker, perhaps one of my teammates, Stephen Burke, really low-key cyclist, low-key coach. When I had my back operation in 2015, as a professional cyclist that, I still had overheads at that point in time, still had dependents, still identified as a cyclist, and that was your be-all and end-all. We were 9 months out from Olympic Games, back surgery. I woke up, I had 3 messages on my phone. One from a coach, one from a girlfriend, one from Stephen Burke, my teammate. You know, when I went home, there was a present waiting from Berkey. Like, that's how you find out who leaders are. You know what I mean? They don't have to be loud or charismatic. They've just got to be there when you need them.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
And we talked actually quite a lot about team and your teammates. And I think our listeners and us, obviously, would be really interested to understand, well, what makes a really good team, especially in a sport team, and how do you build that trust? Because it's huge, especially as you're in a team cycling sport area. What does it take?
How do you build trust? Yeah, I mean, what I've just said in terms of, like, you've got to be, like, the trust is built in the trenches when your back's against the wall, not when things are good. But also that point about clarity again. Clarity builds trust in teams, I think. And if I can sort of like paint this in a story, again, off the back of 2012, like British cycling was struggling. I was struggling. You know, every member of staff and athlete was in a big existential crisis because like success didn't land as we thought it might, and it was difficult. And everyone's head was in different places. And we had this coach come in called Heiko. Now, Heiko he's from East Europe, and you know, in East Europe they have a traditional way of working. It's very much dictatorship's not the right words, but
Directive,
yeah. He started with a big team, and he'd sort of break it down one by one until you were left with 4 riders. But I'm not saying Heiko was the perfect leader, but what he did do really, really well is give us clarity.
Yeah.
You know, I've never had a coach sort of like say, right, we're going to start this effort at 30 seconds past, 5 minutes past. It was ridiculous, but we knew where the goalposts were.
Yeah.
We had a very clear, sharp definition of like, this is an important race, that's an important championship. And as soon as we knew that, it's like the comms team, the engineering team, the physio team, the coaches, the riders, we could all like unite around a clear sense of success. It was like an unstoppable pack of husky dogs, all pulling, all pulling against the weight.
Yeah.
In terrible conditions, but all pulling in the same direction. And, you know, like a big pack of daft dogs, we'd stop at nothing. We'd just plough through hell and high water if we knew where we were going, and it was like a big united effort, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Love that. I
Yeah.
love that. And how do you manage, I guess, if you've got different people in your team and maybe performance is different, how do you ensure that as a team you're supporting each other and pushing each other forward and not going, oi, come on?
It's interesting. So I mean, all of my gold medals that I won, in the Olympics at least, were in the team pursuit, which is a 4-person event. And, you know, in simple terms, it's a 16-lap race. You don't do 25% of the race each. You don't do 4 laps each with 4 guys in our case. It's not like that. It doesn't matter how we get there. You know, sometimes I'll do the majority of work at the start because I was a better starter. Sometimes Bradley Wiggins, because he's a Tour de France champion, he's got a bigger aerobic system, would pull bigger turns at the back end of the race. Sometimes the team had been selected and there was 4 riders that entered the Olympic Village. There was no substitution we could put in, and Geraint would get food poisoning. And if he was the weakest rider, or if I was the weakest rider, it didn't matter. It was, success wasn't defined by how many turns you could pull or who's the strongest in the team. It was defined by, like, no matter where you're at, everyone gives 100%, and we build a strategy in terms of like how many laps on the front you do each, so the team can get from A to B as quick as we can, and it was no more complicated than that. I mean, different characters in the team, with different characters, different interests, but again, this is why I believe in sport, really, and a team sport in particular. I mean, it's got a weird way of just bonding. I never had any like struggles to get on with my teammates. You know, there was teammates I had absolutely nothing in common with. Perhaps the best example is my life today. You know, on Sunday mornings I get on my electric mountain bike, and there's a guy that's an engineer in Huddersfield. There's a guy that fixes farm machinery. One guy's a fancy director from Asda. Like, we've got nothing in common. Nothing. But like, you know, if we go ploughing our mountain bikes in the snow and have a good struggle up a hill and
Yeah.
you know, have a crash on a descent, it just brings us together somehow. And yeah, something weird about sport that just unites teams, and I like that. Yeah.
So there's so much in it that when you're in a team in the business sense, you don't see some of that, but you just put it into that sport world and you go, oh, right, well, what that's saying is you've got to have a, you know, a real purpose. There's something pulls you together, even if, you know, you're all different. You've got to know your strengths. That's what you talked about. It's kind of where we all knew in terms of strategy, who had strengths for what. You know, we forget that as leaders. And we all go, we're in it together. We win or lose together. We're just going to give 100% and we're going to pull that. And then we just get into the trenches and work it out and build trust that way. And it's really hard to see that sometimes when you're not in that space, you know, and all those things that we go, yeah, that makes sense, kind of disappears. But it makes it so clear. And the clarity in that in the sport, I absolutely agree.
Purpose, it's the word you use there. It's almost like a given in sport. It's a very clear purpose, daft as it is. It's we're going to get our skin suits on and ride around a big wooden track, and you know, it's that idea. And he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. And you know, it's if you can ever instill like a real purpose across your entire organisation and team, I think that's when things really like step into life.
So much.
And do you think it's easier you referred to it in sport, it's simple, it's not easy. How do you think that translates then to the business world or the world you're doing in like health these days? And is there the correlation?
It's a really good question. I try as best I can to make success as clearly defined and as simple as possible. It's very difficult, you know, like that health example I gave you. Like, I mean, what is health? How do you measure it? You know, and how do you measure the things that line into that big, audacious goal? Everyone's got a different idea, and it's very, very difficult. And everyone's got a different idea. I mean, I think it's no coincidence that there's a guy called Chris Boardman. Sort of rose to fame, didn't he, in 1992 for riding funnily enough, a very aerodynamically efficient Lotus bike in the Barcelona Olympics. I've known Chris Boardman because he used to lead our research and innovation team in British cycling, and now he is the Active Lives Commissioner and spends most of his time in a suit in Parliament trying to instigate societal change. I wouldn't say I'm not close to Chris. I'm not in touch with him every day, but when I struggle to make sense of the world, or I'm struggling to try to fix a problem, I speak to Chris. And Chris, funnily enough, thinks like I do. You know, he likes to try and take the complexity out of things as much as he possibly can. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend you can adopt that same model and say, right, on this date we're going to achieve these numbers, and we're going to line into it by asking two very, very simple questions. But if I look at Chris and his trajectory and the massive progress he's made, and he has made like unbelievable progress and instigated real societal change, I think he does his best to relate it to those sporting questions. What's a clear, sharp definition of success? What must be true in order to get that? He always asks interesting questions, as Chris, and
it's so powerful.
It
isn't
is,
it?
those two things.
And I always think of Brené Brown, you know, and she says clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Which making me think, I've always thought of that in terms of performance, but I'm actually thinking that about clarity and direction in that, as this conversation's evolved. And there's times when, you know, you've questioned yourself, going, why are we doing this course or programme? You know, you people who have rocked up and going, you can see it on the face. Like, why am I here? And the minute you can't answer that. I did a podcast called Lee Rogers Meets, right? And it was before this, and I'd had a brilliant guest on, Darren Hughes, who's on the High Performance podcast. You know, 150 million downloads. I was buzzing, and my wife came in one day and she went, Lee, why are you doing this? And I didn't have a response for him. And in that moment, I stopped it instantly, because I didn't know what the purpose was. I was just being exploratory or whatever.
Yeah.
But I stopped until I could answer the question.
Yeah.
And then Lisa and I have, leadership actually was born.
Yeah.
But it was that thinking through and going, no, I know where I'm investing my time, effort, and energy towards something.
Exactly. What was you can take that mindset into a single meeting or your yearly targets or your 5-year. What's the purpose? Why are we here? Why do we exist? I sometimes do it. I've been in that role a few years now, in the Active Lives Commissioner's sort of role, and I'm sort of at the stage where I can sort of confidently sit down there with a team I sort of know well, and I can say, okay, what's the purpose of this meeting, guys? And what does success look like in an hour's time when we finish here? And even just asking those questions at the start, it provokes a little, like, we need to get to the end of this meeting and we need to have a call to action of X, Y, and Z. Do you know what I mean? Just because otherwise, it's just easy to lose focus. Yeah.
100%, I can see that.
Yeah.
We literally could speak. I could sit here for the next 3 hours and speak to you. You are an absolutely fascinating guest, and thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak to us. It's been a real privilege.
Oh, thanks, Lee. Thanks, Lisa.
Can I ask one quick question?
Of course you can.
Because you started that you are a dreamer. So what are you dreaming next, Ed? What's on the horizon? What's your next clear, specific goal? I
have 2 roles in life, and to be honest, I'm not taking my own advice of focus. Yeah. I've got multiple things going on still, but there's 2 main jobs. I have the Active Lives job, where we're trying to be the healthiest region. I'm still trying to work towards clarity in that, by how much, by when. I want Southfield. This means a lot to me, that job. I was born in Barnsley, I grew up in a relatively challenged family, and what's my why? To go back to where it all started, to try and give other kids that same sense of like freedom, independence, exploration that I once had as a kid, the ones that face the biggest barriers. So that's one of my projects. The other one is with British Cycling, and it's to bring the joy of cycling again to those that face the biggest barriers. What are the problems with cycling? Bikes aren't cheap, and we have safety issues out on the roads. And if I can, there's no clear, sharp definition of success for that project yet, that's for sure. But I'm trying to work out what that is. That's my why. I want to try and bring the joy of cycling to those that face the biggest barriers. I think when I'm on my deathbed in a few years' time, I'll look back and I don't think I'll have any real satisfaction or joy out of the accolades or the Olympic medals so much. I think our most enduring measure of success is, the platform you can give to others and what you can do to help other people succeed. Yeah.
I love that, Ed. I think if anyone can do it, you can do it. I think it's a big challenge, societal change. That's what you're after. Yeah. But what a legacy to leave behind. And actually, the fact that you have been able to achieve that allows you to have a platform to do that and to make that dream come true. And so I really hope that, and I am sure that will happen. It's really important. We need to see change out there, and cycling can be a massive way of doing that. It helps, young people and everybody to think about life differently. And and anything we can do to help in that space, we totally will. You've been absolutely amazing, given us lots of insight and more humble. And lots of you've achieved so much brilliant stuff, and you're very humble with it and sharing some of that. We really appreciate it. So, thank you.
Thanks. That's very kind, team. Thank you.
I've got 2 final questions.
Yeah.
One is you will know. I guess one question is, will you join me or support me in the Land's End to John O'Groats cycle in some way? Whether it's like, I don't know what that looks like, but it'd be great to have a conversation outside of this, maybe nutrition, whatever it is, because it feels like a long, big chunky thing right now that I'm like...
Can't go to Greg's for lunch.
I'm not going to Greg's. But the second thing is, who should we have in the hot seat where you are now that you could help get us there from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, question number 1. Yeah, of course, give me a ring at any point. I'll help with with advice on nutrition or sleep or training. And yeah, if I can make it out to see you on a bit of stage, I'll try and join you en route as well. But only if we give it the big marginal gains and we're there in skin suits and aero helmets going flat out.
Absolutely. I need to lose a bit of timber to but that'd be amazing.
Yeah, and question 2. I've mentioned a couple of big names there. There's Professor Steve Peters. I'd probably say he's the single most impactful person I've ever met, in terms of my life and trajectory and way of thinking. So it'd be a great guest if you could get hold of him. I'm not sure she'd be a good guest. I've been partnered up with a lady called Nicola Marshall for the last 3 years, my Active Lives job. And she came from a state school. She was she went to Oxford. She got a law degree. She went to the city. She went internationally doing a job. She then sort of decided to work in more sort of charitable things and sort of worked her way up the layer cakes of Cycling UK, Save the Children, and for reasons unbeknown to me, she's decided to move to South Yorkshire, and she puts it with me on a daily basis. And would she be a good podcast guest? I'm not sure. After 3 years of working with her, I'm not sure. She's not like, I know she'd open up and sort of like show her like a soul like I perhaps would. But I am fascinated by Nicola. She's been an incredible leader and the single most impactful person I've met since retiring.
Wow,
Yeah.
what an accolade. Well, I'm sure she would.
Yeah.
In fact, we'd love to meet her.
Absolutely. Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. That wraps up for this episode. Thanks for watching, listening. We'd love to hear your views and comments what Ed said today. And subscribe, like and follow Leadership Actually.